I've recently started doing a lot of double closings because they are a great way to make quick, fast, and easy money when done correctly. So I want to take the time today to create this video so that you guys can build up your confidence and pay down the ignorance tax on understanding how these processes and transactions work so that you can go do the exact same thing. If you don't already know me, my name is Ryan Schroep. I've done over 135 successful lending transactions in the last year, and I like to jump on here and try and teach you guys how to do the same thing so you can make money and accomplish whatever the heck it is you're trying to accomplish in your life. So, transactional lending is the name of the game. Today we're going to be talking specifically about double closings. Hopefully I can write this large enough to be able to be seen. Double closings. So, to get started with double closings, we have to understand what a double closing actually is, and probably more importantly, what a double closing isn't. So let's go ahead and throw the definition up on the screen here of a double closing. A double closing, by definition, is also known as a simultaneous closing or a back-to-back closing, and it's a real estate transaction method involving two separate but related closings occurring on the same day. Now, that is great to know because guess what? A lot of people think things are double closings when they are in fact not double closings, and that's very important to note. So a couple things that I want to emphasize from that definition. The first thing is that it's a transaction occurring between at least three parties, because there's going to be an A, a B, and a C party in a double closing, and the big kicker there is that it happens simultaneously on the same day. That's how we're going to be defining a double closing today. So in theory, you're going to have A sell to B and then B sell to C, and those things are going to happen at the same time. That is what's important for us to note here, right? That stuff is happening at the same time. So now that we got that out of the way, let's talk a little bit more about double closings in general. So what are they? We define that. Where do they come from? So in general, the most common use of a double closing is if there is a wholesaler, which we've talked plenty about on here. If there's a wholesaler that is buying a property from somebody and then assigning it, wholesaling it to an end buyer, sometimes instead of assigning a contract, which is where you take the one contract and you just assign it to somebody else. Instead of assigning the contract, you keep that first contract and you just make a second contract, right? Two contracts, one A to B, one B to C. Would you look at that? That's how things pop up. So we've got two contracts for a double closing. Now, they generally are going to occur if a wholesaler is either trying to hide stuff, like how much money they're making, which, you know, a little shady, right? But wholesalers are shady in general. Sorry, had to say it. But there's other reasons too, right? Like I'll be doing a breakdown of one that I did where it had to do with a 1031 exchange. Sometimes it has to do with state laws, things like that. There's a whole lot of stuff that goes into it. To be super honest with you guys, I don't give a crap why somebody is doing it. As long as everything lines up, it's good to go for me. The only reason why it's important to understand why people do it is so that you can go find more opportunities like it to make money, and that is cool. So I brought my tiny eraser today, but we're going to break down the double closing process. So obviously, one of the most important things is actually finding a double closing to work on. Now, I'm not going to be showing you guys how to find double closings today, but if you want me to make videos about how to find double closings, then I would recommend you leave a comment down there so that I can actually take the time to write something up and actually explain it to you, which I love doing. But we're not talking about that today. Today we're just talking about the process of double closings in general. So we are going to start the process at when a deal actually comes in, right? That's when you start the process, when the deal actually comes in. So if we are doing this in steps, we'll say that step one is receive deal. Now, what does that mean to receive the deal? Well, like we just talked about, there's going to be somebody, A to B and a B to C, and the A to B, what happens, I probably didn't explain this well enough. It's on me. Still learning, right? But the A to B, A, B, C, we'll draw this out again. So the A to B transaction, for simple numbers, let's say we'll keep it small. So we'll say that this is $80,000. All right? So $80,000, actually, I'm going to make it easier on myself. Even though I do like math, we're going to say that this is $100,000, right? So that means that the wholesaler is buying the property for $100,000. Now, if they're a wholesaler, they want to make money, right? So they're not just going to buy it for $100,000. They're then going to sell it, let's say for $120,000, right? So buy it for 100, sell it for 120, keep the difference, bada bing, bada boom, making some money. Good stuff. Cool. So that's what the transaction is going to look like. Now, in a double closing, so if this was a regular wholesale deal and they weren't double closing it, then what would happen is this 100K here would just, the 120K would cover it, right? Because they're just assigning the contract. And this guy right here would keep that 20K, right? They would keep the difference. They would make that money. But that's not how it works in a double closing. What happens in a double closing is that there is literally, as we defined earlier, two separate transactions that go on. So to go back here, we've got our 100K transaction and then our 120K transaction. Now the 120K is obviously going to be brought by our end buyer per normal, right? If you're buying a deal, you got to bring the money. It doesn't matter if it's hard money lender, your own money, private money, nobody cares. You're bringing the money, right? So that's coming from C. But if you're doing a double closing, then B is responsible for bringing $100,000. $100,000 liquid cash, which is not necessarily easy to do, depending on who you are. Most people don't keep that kind of money around. And keep in mind, these double closings can go way up over $100,000 for sure. But they have to come up with that money cash. So when we talk about receiving a deal, the person requesting the deal is this guy right here, the person in the middle, right? The person in the middle is saying, hey, I'm double closing this deal. I need $100,000 in cash to get this thing closed so that I can earn the right to go make that 20K, right? Which I would very much like to do because I'm a wholesaler and I like making money. So they come to us and we receive the deal. We receive the request from them for that $100,000. Well, what happens next? So the first thing you should do on any transactional lending deal or any lending deal or probably any deal in general is collect info, right? So I talked to you guys at the beginning about how a lot of people think stuff is a double closing when it's not, or think a deal is a certain type of deal when it's not. This very much comes into play with these things. So you want to collect info to confirm whether or not it's a deal. What does that info look like? Well, for double closing, as we have mentioned multiple times now, there is an A to B and a B to C closing. Both of those are going to have separate contracts, right? If there's only one contract, that's not a double closing. That's just a regular wholesale transaction where it gets assigned. But otherwise, there's two contracts. So for the sake of explaining things, we're going to say that there's what's called an A to B contract, which would be your contract between the original seller and the wholesaler or the middleman, whatever they are. And then you're going to have a B to C contract. And that's going to be the second contract that should be at a higher purchase price, right, between the wholesaler and whoever the end buyer is. So the first info thing is the A to B and the B to C contracts. The next thing is that, interestingly enough, for a double closing, you don't actually need to do anything with money until the deal closes. So what you need to get is the closing date, right? When are you going to need my money, right? Do you need it tomorrow? Do you need it in a week? Do you need it in a month? Nobody ever brings it to you a month and ahead, but in theory they could, right? So we're going to collect those first two contracts. We're going to collect the closing date. Now, double closings are not that hard, and this is really the majority of what you're going to collect is these three things right here, right? This is what I collect. But the next thing that we're going to do when we're collecting this information is we're going to verify that. And to verify, we need to talk to title. So we'll say that we need to collect title info, right? So who's the title company responsible? Who's the liaison, escrow officer, attorney, whatever, whoever you're talking to. We need to get their information so that we can get that stuff sorted out. So this is what we're collecting when we receive the deal. Now, before we go to step two, what can we do on step one to confirm that this is actually a deal? Well, is there an A to B contract? Is there a B to C contract? If there's not two contracts, it's either not a double closing or they're not ready to submit it yet, right? Sometimes people say, oh, we don't have the contract yet. Well, that means you don't actually know that you have a double closing. You can keep me in mind, right? But I'm not wasting any time on this until there's the potential of a transaction actually happening. So you got to confirm that there's those two contracts. The other things that you're confirming on top of this is just the basic information that we talked about in the definition, which is people that try to bring double closings that are not double closings. So questions, I'm going to screen grab that so that I can erase this. And the questions, some of the questions that you're going to ask, again, before you move forward at all, is just the things that you want to do to make sure that this is actually a deal that you would actually fund. So let me write those questions up here. And we're going to count this as collecting info too, because it's really just understanding the transaction in general. So one of the questions, I'll put a big question mark here, that you're going to ask is this same day? Important, right? is this closing on the same day? Is this a transaction that's going to close on the same day? If somebody comes to you and says, hey, I need you to wire the funds for a week and then it's going to close the next week, it's not a double closing, right? It might be some sort of something else, but it's not a double closing. Double closing, we defined simultaneous transaction. So this is a big question that I ask on the front end is it actually going to close on the same day? And do we have things in order? Again, there's a lot less verification that goes into these than things like EMD that you may have heard me talk about, because that's a lot more detailed. These make less money overall, but they're a lot quicker. It's a balancing act. Everything's cool. But this is one of the main questions that you're going to ask is it going to close on the same day? So make sure you take note of that. If you guys get sent a deal, or you want to send me a deal or send somebody else a deal that's a double closing, you are capable of confirming the stuff that we just talked about. Like, you don't have to send that stuff in. You can confirm that first. Make sure that everything's good to go. It'll totally work, right? And it would be much appreciated to do exactly that. So make sure that you can do that. But that's step one. All right, step two, after receiving the deal, we're jumping in and talking to title. So let's get this erased off of here, and we'll talk about what you're talking to title about, which is going to be completely different than an EMD deal, if you guys have talked to me about that. So step two, talk with title or an attorney. I always call it title, but it can be either of those things. So we're talking to title, and what we're going to confirm with title is a couple things. First of all, we'll call it, or we'll just do bullet points. So first one is that they will wire. Now, why is this important? Well, some title companies, because of the wire fraud, which screw you to all the people that cause problems with wires, but because of wire fraud, some title companies only send checks. So why is that important? Well, if I send 100 grand, right, like we talked about in this example, and they send it back 30 minutes later, that is a successful double closing, where I make my money and I get my money right back so that I can go do it again or do whatever the heck else I want to do with it. But if they don't, if they send a check, then I could send 100 grand and potentially it takes 5 to 7 days or whatever to get my money back. Then I have to deposit it. Depending on what bank you're using, it takes a couple days to deposit that money. Turns into a total problem. So this is something that you might not think about with something like this, but it's a question that I ask right off the bat. Hey, just want to make sure that you guys are going to be wiring the funds when you disperse them at the end of this thing. So asking the question of whether or not they will wire. The next question, another doozy, is understand. I'm going to put DC for simplicity. Do you understand the double close? This is something that I have not always done well, right? So I understand double closing. By the time you finish watching this video, you will understand double closing, but not all title companies either understand it, have done it before, or maybe even want to do it, right? So you have to confirm on the front end your expectations. Welcome to, communication 101, right? Confirm your expectations. So when we're talking to them, it's, hey, do you understand how this process works? Have you done this before? Is there anything we need to clarify? Are we on the page? Get that done at the beginning, right? This is why it's step 2. This isn't like step 10, right? This is like right off the bat, ASAP. Have that discussion. Make sure that you guys are on the same page. That kind of leads into the next one, which is I'm going to talk to them about my process, which I will talk to you guys about. So my process that I'll write out on here is important to confirm with them so that, again, we're on the same page, because I may not do my double closing process the same as everybody else. And that's why I hate umbrella words like double closing, because if everyone thinks it goes the same way, that can cause you problems when, in fact, it does not. So I talk about my process. I'm going to erase this and then show you guys what my process actually is so that you can write it down and learn from it. But I'm going to ask them, or actually I'm going to explain to them my process and then basically confirm, hey, does this work with what you guys are doing? Are we on the same page? Is everything good to go? So that's cool. And then let's see. Oh, then the last thing that I'm going to do while I'm on the phone with them is go ahead and confirm the wire info. This is something that I've learned. Usually I would wait longer, because if something gets sent in and it doesn't need to be funded for a week, you don't really need the wire info right now. But what I've learned is when you get to the end of these transactions, which we're working towards, you don't want to have any hiccups or anything held up. So while you have them on the phone, just go ahead and confirm the wire instructions. Have them email it, call them, confirm it, get it put into your system so that you have it and you're good to go. So these are the 4 things that we're confirming. Let's do a little bit of a deep dive here on my actual process. So assuming you're watching this video because you want to learn and you don't just enjoy looking at my colorful jersey that I'm wearing, this is a writer downer for you, or at least something that you can come back to and check on. So here's my process that we're breaking down more in depth in this entire video. But the process that I confirm with them is, first of all, we'll call it step 1, confirm A to B HUD. Now, I hate acronyms, so what does that mean? Well, the A to B HUD is the first transaction that comes through. We need to confirm that so that we can make sure we understand, hey, how much money are we actually paying, right? So if somebody requests $60,000, or the example we gave was $100,000, right? So if somebody requests $100,000, cool. It's usually going to be a ballpark because this is real estate. So there's going to be random fees, whatever. So if somebody requests $100,000, I'm not just going to wire $100,000. I need to confirm the actual amount that I'm sending. So I'm going to do that first. Once I've confirmed that amount, which for the record, it could take an hour, it could take a week. You're generally not going to know that full amount until the transaction is pretty close to closing, because that's when all this stuff gets finalized. Real estate does not do stuff in advance. So once I've confirmed that A to B amount, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that amount, and then I'm going to add my fee, whatever that might be, and then I'm going to send that to the title company to note so that they know how much to pay me, right? So what I do is my step 2 is that I'll send a payoff. And like I just said, what a payoff is hey, I sent you $100,000, you owe me $102,000 back. Here's my official letterhead payoff statement for you to sign, saying a couple things. One, that you agree to not move this money anywhere else. You agree to keep it in escrow. You agree to everything we just talked about. And you agree to send me this much money back. So I send that nice and in writing so that they have it. They can put it in their files. When they get that number, what they do is that they will then send the B2C HUD. This is very important. So we have the A to B HUD for the first transaction, then we have the B2C HUD for the second transaction. And that B2C HUD is going to have my payoff amount on there. So it's going to say Ryan's LLC is going to make this much money. It's going to be right there. And they're going to send it to me as I request that they do, so that I can confirm that the information is correct and the amount is correct. Once we've done these 3 things, which it took me a minute to explain it to you, but it could take 10 minutes to do in real life, or it could take like 3 days. It depends on how fast they are and how well communicated and how well everything's set up, honestly. But once they've sent this and I've actually confirmed it, which no surprise for those of you who work with title companies, they rarely get it right on the first try, even though it is written very clearly on the payoff statement, which is always fun, right? But they rarely get it right on the first try. So once I've actually approved that HUD statement, that means I know how much money to send, and they have now signed that they know how much money to send back to me. So then what needs to happen? Well, once that's confirmed, the last step of my process is wait for B2C funds. Now this is the one that can be a kicker, depending on who you're working with. So typically speaking, we want everything to go smoothly, but for protection on my behalf on a double closing, I do not send my money until the end buyer has already sent their money in. Why? Because if I'm going to send $100,000 and they have already sent in $120,000, then I know without a shadow of a doubt that I am good to go on getting my money back, right? Because that's the transaction, as long as everything is set up well like we've talked about. So I know that I'm good to go to get my money back. What can happen is if I send my money first and they're like, oh yeah, don't worry about it, we're going to fund by the end of the day or whatever. That's not worth crap. Right? You don't know that they're actually going to do that. There's no guarantee of anything. I have been in real estate deals where people did not fund when they said they would. They didn't fund within the week when they were supposed to. Sometimes they didn't end up funding at all. There is absolutely no guarantee until the funds are sitting in the account. So for my protection, I'm not playing that game, right? Especially with big amounts of money like this. Heck no, I'm not playing that game. So my 4th step is waiting for those B2C funds to be in. This is my process, and this is what I'm confirming with the title company when I talk to them and when I email with them for step 2. It is a large step because it's the most important step. So, quick recap. Step number 1, get the deal to come in, confirm all of the deal details, and make sure they're good to go. Step 2 is your discussion with title. It's the biggest step by far. It's where you confirm all the information. I confirm my processes, make sure they're okay with them. I confirm the HUDs. I confirm not only how much money I'm sending, but how much money I'm getting back. That is all getting done in step 2. It was kind of a big step, I know. Now, step 3, once we've confirmed all those things, what needs to happen? Well, we're chilling, right? We're not doing anything else. We're just the lenders. That's why being a lender is pretty cool, right? So step 3 is that we are going to wait confirmation. So again, good communication, establishing guidelines up front. When I'm on the phone with them or emailing back and forth with them, I just say, hey, once we've got all this stuff confirmed, I'm just going to let you know I've already added you into my system, right? That's why I confirmed the wire instructions. I've got everything ready to rock and roll. And all I need you to do is reach out to me with a receipt of the money being received in escrow, right? You have received the B2C funds like we talked about. As soon as I get that email that they've received that, we'll go to step 4. Simple step, send the money, right? Kind of seems like a fast process, but that's because I spend so much time up front confirming information, confirming the data, having those discussions. So when I get an email, like today, while we're filming this, I just sent a deal where the email came in, hey Ryan, here's the receipt for the funds, and I didn't have to do anything else because I had already talked to them. I had already confirmed everything. I sent the money like that, and it was there like 5 minutes later. You know, the wire had been sent through, confirmed, whatever. They sent the email back, and they started dispersing the funds back to everybody, right? So it can be really fast, but you can send the money fast as long as you've gotten step 3 done and everything else has been done prior to that. Now, a couple small things to note that, again, it's important to understand this entire process here. So we have now confirmed that the B2C funds are in there, and then we have now wired our money. Well, we're not quite done yet, although we're pretty close. So obviously, back on the beginning of step 2, we talked about confirming the wire information and also confirming our processes and things like that. So once we've sent the money, step 5 is to really reverse that process. So we want, let's say, receive I don't know what to call this. I'm just going to say receive wire call. So what is that? Well, it's the inverse. So at the beginning of this, we called them and confirmed their wire instructions. What we do, if we have set everything up correctly, is that they are now expecting us to fund this deal. And as soon as we fund it, if we've set it up again, then that means as soon as we fund it, they're going to be dispersing that money right back to us. So usually, if you've done it correctly within 30 minutes to an hour or something like that, depending on how busy they are, they should be reaching back out with a wire call to me saying, hey, Ryan, we've got your funds, deal's ready to disperse, you're going to get your money back plus your return. We just need to confirm your wire instructions. Same thing I do to them, right? Super simple. So that's a great call to get. Anytime you get a call confirming wire instructions, that means that money's about to come back to you. So bueno, we love that. But we're going to confirm that. And then final step, maybe the best step of them all, is repeat. And that is the end of the double closing process. If you are somebody who does double closings consistently and you want to work with somebody who knows what the heck they're doing and has their processes in place, you can go to swiftdmd.com and request a double closing from me, and I will get back to you ASAP. And if you're somebody who knows people that does double closings and wants to work with me, you can send them to swiftdmd.com, have them put you in as a referral, and you will get paid a chunk of the deal just for bringing it.